Hello again. Today I am going to talk about the second chapter that is in the empowerment series. And this is going to be about listening, and it's about listening in to the neutral zone. So I want you to pay attention to what I have to say and take it to heart, examine yourself, and become empowered by what you're going to hear. So in the last video, we did discuss the environment that's necessary in order to move into empowerment, how important it is to understand the roles of people over us, or if we're holding on to our own power. We summarized the trickery that was going on with that, and now we're going to take this trickery into the words that are oftentimes used. The trickery is used against humanity in order to disempower and suppress them. And it's done very craftily because they know how to play with your emotions. So it's very careful to be aware of that. So how did all this trickery become possible? It became possible because of an interesting phenomena that I call spinning whatever is being said. In other words, there's a little bit different flavor put onto it. There's a little spin. And they do that by using particular words that are going to trigger an emotion or an idea in somebody that may amplify or take down the importance of what is being said. What I think that when they spin this like this, what I see that as is that they're casting spells on us because they're getting us to think in a different way than we maybe would think. Oftentimes fear is seasoned into that dialogue that is twisting and turning and spinning things. And so it is, in a sense, it's like creating a spell, putting a person under a spell, because suddenly they're not thinking for themselves. They're becoming an echo chamber. And what I think is really important is that the word spell is also what we do when we are spelling words. When we are writing out words, we're spelling. So it's just an interesting little play of words there, just to show you how that might work. So the definition of listening, it's to make a concise effort to hear. So that's a concise effort to hear, to take heed and to take advice. So listening is something that you have to work at. Very few people really know how to listen to people. The thing that happens is they are either thinking about what they're going to say next, or they think they know how a person is going to finish their sentence, so they interrupt what they're saying, and they never get the full thought form or the full idea of what this person is trying to get across. There's an interruption, and then the conversation will usually veer in another direction, and the conversation does not go forward in any kind of meaningful manner. Sometimes it's fun to talk like that, but when you're really trying to solve problems or get to the bottom of something or learn something that's important, you've got to listen to the entire concept of what's happening, and then from there bring in your own ideas, your own points of view, and discuss the two. And what you usually find is then things move forward, because a lot of times people are really saying the same thing, they're just saying it with different words. So it's important to understand that. So when we go back a little bit and think about the words that might oppress, it's going to carry this different meaning to a sentence. So this playing on the emotions with these trigger words are something that you're going to have to start to listen and pick up on, because you will get a different meaning out of what is being said when you can understand how you're being spoken to, if the person is authentic or if they're trying to pull wool over your eyes. That's what we need to do. So when you are listening to somebody, the little test that you've got to take to yourself is, let's say that I'm talking to you and I say something that you don't really like to hear. So is there an emotional trigger that goes off with you? Is there something inside of you that triggers that would maybe take this word or this concept and give you a different opinion of what's really being said? When we get triggered by that, we'll either interrupt somebody, we'll storm off, or we'll start calling names, we'll get all hot under the collar, because We're beginning to make our own story in our own head instead of listening to what is being said. So pay attention to that. That's really important, because the triggers are there, especially when you hear it from people who want to oppress and control. They're always going to use trigger words because they're always wanting to get into your emotions, because when they get into your emotions, you're not going to be thinking clearly for yourself, and you're going to be running around doing what you're told. The interpretation that you are picking up from somebody else without listening is in your own head. You're not listening to what they're trying to say. You're not listening to anything other than what your thoughts are, what your own opinions are, and what you're going to say next. So that's really, really important. I hope you understand how important that is. So when you listen, if you get triggered, you want to stop yourself and just take a breath, and then just stop that trigger and continue to listen. Make that concise effort to listen to what's being said. It's not always easy, but you got to halt that trigger somehow. You've got to say, it's not personal, it's not any this or that, it's just a trigger that is stimulating something inside of you that is either out of your paradigm of thinking, out of your belief structure, it's different, and it's uncomfortable. So you want to walk away from the conversation when it gets uncomfortable, or you want to call someone a name when it gets uncomfortable, or you want to begin to argue and insist that your way is right, or you got to prove it to somebody that you're right, and it just gets into a mess, just a total mess. So it is very important to learn how to listen closely to what's being said. You've got to get clarity to what is meant by each word. And you need to ask questions like, what did you mean by this? Sometimes you also need to just say, all right, let me make sure I'm hearing you clearly. Are you saying blah, blah, blah? And if they say yes, then you're on the right track. If they say no, then say, well, what are you saying? Because it's very important to understand each other. We just have to if we're going to survive in a good, peaceful, free society. So if we practice this, we'll begin to go on forward from there on out as we practice it, and we'll be able to really listen to what people say. And you'll find that maybe what we wanted to say because we thought we knew what they were going to say doesn't really have any meaning to what's being said. So we can drop what we were thinking, drop what we were imagining, and we could just move forward thinking and speaking with forward-moving discussion. So how do we develop that skill to listen? I've pretty much summarized it already, but we want to make sure that we listen to the entire thought of another. We want to not make our own meaning up about what they're saying. If one doesn't like what's being heard, you've got to examine what it is you don't like about it and maybe discuss it. Maybe you'll find out that it's not so bad after all. It's just been something imprinted in your head through this propaganda kind of stuff that goes on that twists your mind in a way to give you a different viewpoint or opinion of something. So that's very, very important. Another question and thing to watch yourself with is, are you looking at the person and engaging and connecting with the person as they're speaking? Or are you looking around and not really paying attention? Because when someone's talking and you're looking around, it breaks up a lot. It breaks up the thought process. It causes a little bit of confusion. And then you wonder if they're really listening to you, and chances are they aren't. So just check all that stuff out. Make sure that you're not formulating what you think somebody is saying. Make sure that you're listening, engaging with them, and not interrupting them while they're speaking. Now, there are times when they might get long-winded, or there might be times when they're repeating themselves over and over, but that's an entirely different whole situation. Because usually when people are in a conversation moving it forward, they don't need to repeat themselves because it's already been well heard. So the best thing is to just take it in and research it yourself and find the answers, because there's nothing worse than somebody who wants to always have proof about what you're saying. The mind is where we create, and when we speak with other people, we're like sounding boards. we sound off and we create things and we move things forward. But if somebody is always there demanding that they see the facts or this or that, and they can't play with imagination, in my opinion, that's just an excuse for not really wanting to learn, not really wanting to go any further in it. Just standing in their little arrogance of, I know it all and you got to prove it to me and blah, blah, blah. But that's just not something that we want to do. It's not going to move a conversation forward. It makes people upset. It makes people mad because they're not being heard and because somebody is actually being more of a bully. So please understand that your words are important, what you're speaking is important, what's being understood is important, and it's up to you, the listener, to make sure that you're hearing it correctly and responding appropriately. But you can also respond with your own opinion. The other thing that's really disgusting is these echo chambers where you try to say something to somebody and they've been so into the narrative that is blurted to them in newspapers and TVs, which is propaganda for the most part, and all you get is this repetitive echo chamber of, oh, well, why don't you like this? Well, because of this, this, and this. And it's actually what you've been told. Why are you stocking up on this? Well, because I was told to stock up on this. That's not thinking for yourself. That's disempowerment. We need to examine that. You need to look at that. Are you following the herd? Or are you thinking on your own, for yourself? So, for instance, the trigger words. Let's look at a little bit of what the trigger words are about. When I mention a word, and this is going to be a trigger for some of you, so just sit still and take a deep breath or turn it off if you're going to be upset. When I say socialism, what does that mean to you? Does that seem to you like a fair system? Do you know what that really means? Do you know what those systems really look like? Do you know the meaning and the agenda of socialism and how the power structure is there to control you? Now, there's some socialist countries that are called socialist countries that this ideology works better for them, like in the Scandinavian countries, but they're not socialist countries. They're actually capitalist countries. They have social programs. They all get taxed the exact same rate, and that really hurts the poor, because if it's 10% for the rich and 10% for the poor, that's a fair system, but it's not fair, because everybody's paying the same, they get the same benefits for it, but some people make more and don't make as much. So that isn't really fair. But people think socialism is fair because of what they're told in the spin of things to get them to follow that lead and not think for themselves and be promised things like free stuff or free college or this or that, free medical. What does that really mean? What free medical means in the essence of socialism is there's one kind of medicine. And I'll tell you what that medicine would be if we ever get it. It will be pharmaceuticals, it will be surgeries, it will be, you cannot go to alternative for people then. It's not allowed. But people don't understand that because they've never taken the time to sit down with somebody and actually learn what socialism maybe really is. And when I say the word freedom, what does that mean to you? Does that word mean free stuff? Does it mean that you can do whatever you want to? You don't have to worry about if you harm somebody, you can just bop them on the head if you want to? That's not freedom either. Freedom is something that's not easy to keep. Freedom is not something to walk in. But the freedom is a word that's used a lot in conjunction with free stuff, and it's twisted in a way that people think that socialism is going to give you all the freedoms of a different type of system when it's really going to take away all of your rights, all of your freedoms, and you will be under a very oppressive situation and a totalitarian dictator in control. It's just the way it works. So if you're not going to do your own research and you're not going to search it out, you're going to be deceived by what socialism is or isn't. When someone tells you to be afraid or to be in fear, what does that do to you? What do you feel then? Do those trigger words get you under your skin and you begin to just feel that it's true? Do you feel disempowered and that you need to do what you're told to do? And I have to really say this. I think this is so ridiculous, the way people are freaking out over stockpiling paper products, when if people would just back up and take a look at what's really happening out there, there's no need for any panic in any way, shape, or form. There's no need for any of this closure stuff. Although, I will say in this case, there is something else going on behind the scenes, which has been well researched by a number of people. And we're going to find out very soon. This is actually all right in this setting, because we need to have the people to slow down a little bit and start thinking for themselves and start to assess what's really going on. Because freedom and tyranny we're standing at the doorstep, at the threshold of going one way or the other. So it's important to listen very carefully to who you're going to choose to be in control of the system and what they mean and what they want to do and how you are going to be treated in that system and in that structure. So when you hear the facts about things, it oftentimes will change your perception and your perspective. You do want to have clarification. You want to have clarification of what words mean. You do want to continue to have the meaning of what people are saying instead of making up your own story about what you think they're going to say. And then there's the people that want to only hear what they want to hear. And those people are really disgusting to me in a lot of ways, because they throw things out like, oh, we're a community. We accept everybody's opinion, except the opinions of somebody who wants to follow the law of the land and maybe do something that is lawful rather than unlawful. So those kind of people aren't really paying attention to what's being said. They're saying to everybody, oh, look at me. I'm on such a moral high ground that I am tolerant and I'm going to accept everything. And then I come along and say, can I take you to lunch? Would you please explain to me why you support socialism? This really happened. That's not tolerable for many people out there. And you can see it all over the place. They're just fine when you're thinking the way they're thinking. They're just fine if you're part of their herd, their tribe, their whatever. But as soon as you mention something differently, they get violent. They get very upset. They get mean. And I've seen it everywhere, and you see it. People wear a red hat. They're getting water thrown on them. They're getting hit. But then the words are turned around, and it's like they're the problems, because in the mind of the person doing the violence on the person wearing an innocent hat is a story that they've been told and they've believed because of lack of thinking on their own. That is called brainwashing, and that is what will happen if you don't think for yourself and you don't listen and you don't try to understand the words being said. So the empowerment must involve one to listen carefully to what narrative, belief structure, or cults that you are choosing to either be oppressed by or empowered by. And cult, by the way, you can't be empowered in a cult. You cannot. And a cult is something where everybody thinks the same. They don't think for themselves. So give that some thought. Make sure you're not sitting in that pool of water. Is it a personal situation? Does it have to do with your relationship at home or at work? Is it a community situation? Is it the way the city, the county, the state, or the nation is being handled? You have to listen carefully to who you're putting in those positions to take care of preserving freedom, preserving empowerment. You need to listen carefully to what you hear, and as the Bible says, you need to be quick to listen and slow to speak. Listen to what you're going to say inside your head before you blurt it out. Notice if the conversation is uncomfortable, and if it is uncomfortable, what is it about you that you don't like about it? Don't go throwing crap on other people because you don't like what they're saying. Find out why you don't like what you're saying, and then have at least a conversation about it. It's okay not to agree, but it's not okay to bully just because you don't like something. So I have noticed that when conversations are uncomfortable for people, it's usually because of this. They have a lack of knowledge about what's being said. It's outside of their personal narrative. It's a choice that they want to remain disempowered by the lack of knowledge, which is called willful ignorance. And it's a choice to reason and learn what the small voice of consciousness is saying, which is the voice that if you listen to will calm you down, and it will show you direction, and it will show you that the things that you personally need to work on when you're conversing with somebody, instead of blowing off and being upset. It's a choice to reason and to learn and to listen to that small voice of consciousness inside of you and listen to what it is saying. Because it's that voice that will calm you down. It's that voice that will guide you on your path. It's that voice that will discern for you. And it's that voice that is going to give you the empowerment, because that is who you are at the essence of who you are. That's your consciousness. That's your heart. That's your goodness. That's everything. But if you're going to fly off the handle emotionally and hate people because you don't like what they're saying, you're not even acting decent. So kind of think about that too. The empowered person is the self-made human. They are the ones that are creating excellence, beauty, and joy in their own life and are working hard to create that in the lives of others. So please, learn to listen, learn to assess yourself. You can't blame anybody else for how you're reacting. That's all on you. Remember, a wise person won't be cowed by knowledge. Rather, they're going to use it to guide their way. That's what listening is really all about. So the next series is going to be on discernment. When we learn to listen and we learn to have empowerment, then we can begin to discern. And it's very vital to master discernment, because that's how we stay on the right path, and that's how we continue to be empowered. Thank you again so much for watching. Thank you for enjoying this. Please like, please share, please subscribe. And there's many more videos we plan to make on many other subjects. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.